At the beginning of the week, UFC Vegas 87 only had 9 scheduled fights on the card, and throughout fight week, the UFC has managed to salvage 2 more fights, which now brings it to 11. And obviously, when I dropped the podcast earlier this week, we were not privy to the information in terms of having those 2 new fights, and I thought I might as well put out another quick segment here going over those extra 2 fights just to round out the full card here. Now, I just want to quickly apologize for my voice and the demeanor, as your boy was out all night last night at the Drake and J. Cole concert, and yeah, lacked some sleep last night and obviously feeling it with the voice, but I still want to get this content out for you guys as soon as I could. And that's what I was able to do. A full day of resting up, and then was able to study, get some work done, and now going to record some videos to drop some more content as I usually do to close out the fight week. So for this segment, obviously it's a special one. It's an additional one, something that I don't normally do, but since there are at least 2 fights that have been added to the card, I might as well go over them for you guys. All right, so let's quickly talk about the first one here between Ludovic Klein and AJ Cunningham. Big favorite on the Klein side, I believe minus 800 was the last line that I saw. Klein currently riding a 3-0-1 streak over his last 4 fights. Before that, he was on a 2-fight losing streak. I believe he got finished by Nate Landwehr, and then he lost a decision to Mike Trezano. Now, the one issue that I have with Klein's game is that he's a little bit too low output. This is a guy that goes out there and relies on his big punching power, but it doesn't give himself enough opportunities to try to land the knockout or make it look good enough for the judges if fights just mainly play out in the striking realm. But luckily enough for him, he's been working on his wrestling game where he's going out there and using good chain wrestling, good entries, and then getting his opponents to the ground and grinding them out from that top position. A couple of his opponents have been a little bit too lackadaisical in terms of working back to their feet, which has allowed him to garner enough control time, good damage from that top position, and then optically making it good look good for the judges as well. I'm not so privy on backing guys, especially at such wide odds here, who have that low output flaw in their system. And obviously it's working out for Klein recently, but that draw that he went to against Jai Herbert could have easily been a loss for him, and I thought he got away with one with that point being taken away in the final frame against Herbert. I get it, it was repeated offenses, but that last one that triggered the point deduction, in my opinion, was not even to the nuts. It was more so to the hip. So good on Klein for digging into his soccer roots or whatever it is to get that point taken away from Herbert. But still, solid fighter, good all around. He showed improvements in the wrestling, and that's the most important aspect. His opponent this weekend, AJ Cunningham, fell short on the Contender Series late last year, where he got knocked out by Stephen Nguyen, not once, but twice, in my opinion, as at the ending of the first round, obviously we saw Nguyen hurt him badly. Obviously we saw Cunningham stumble back to his stool. If that fight went for a couple more seconds, that probably would have been stopped, but then Nguyen luckily was still able to go out there and get that second round finish. Cunningham is a guy that likes to utilize his Muay Thai from range with his kicks and his punches, but he just doesn't do the best in terms of maintaining that range and utilizing his distance management. That allows opponents to crash the pocket easily and land big shots on him, which have ultimately resulted in him either getting finished or just losing his fights. The majority of opponents that he's been beating on the regional scene are pretty much below average regional level fighters, and he doesn't really have a high level win on his record to date. Even after losing the Contender Series fight, he took on a fight in December against 8-10 opponent who he was able to finish within 2 minutes of that fight starting. But that's not enough for me to believe that he deserves a spot on the UFC roster. Nothing against Cunningham, but there are so many other fighters, one of which I'll be talking about in the second fight, who deserve to be in the UFC and have a stellar run that they're currently on against legitimate competition that deserve to be in the UFC. Over a guy like AJ Cunningham, who, sure, he might, I get the UFC has had their eye on him for a little bit now, but still, he doesn't have that run or legitimate wins to give him this spot. I get it. It's short notice. Maybe Klein wanted to fight this weekend for sure, and they're just throw him anybody. But, signings like him, signings like Weston Wilson, it just leaves a lot of why? there's so many other more deserving guys. But again, Cunningham, decent Muay Thai, decent striking, but his durability, not the greatest. I expect Klein to crash the pocket pretty effectively here, land his big shots, and either knock him out or look to get this to the ground where he can grind him out for that top position. And that's where my concern in this fight lays in terms of trying to find an approach to bet Klein with. If Klein trusts his power enough and his durability, he should be able to crash the pocket enough and land that big shot to knock Cunningham out. But you can't really trust him to do that because he's just gone out there and grinded opponents out in the past where you're just like, this guy could easily go out there and knock this guy out, but he's unable to. Like, he was unable to knock out a very chinny and fragile Jai Herbert, and we saw that fight go the full 50 minutes, and Herbert is obviously much better than Cunningham here, but it's tough to trust the approach that Klein is going to be taking going into fights. And you're getting, I think, minus 125 for him to win by knockout. Not bad, but, throwing him into parlays at minus 800 is a no-no in my opinion. So this fight is a pass for me all in all. I expect Klein to win. I expect him to get the knockout, but the prices are just not intriguing enough for me to pull the trigger here. All right, let's talk about the next fight that ended up getting booked for this weekend on short notice. We got lock dog Vinicius Oliveira, who was originally supposed to fight Frenchman Yanis Gamuri, I believe the guy's name was. Gamuri pulled out, and in steps Bernardo Sopaj, a very high-level prospect from the regional scene. Started or had a lot of his training over there at All Stars Training Center in Sweden, most famously known for Alexander Gustafsson and Hamza Chimaev and those guys. But has also been spending time down in Florida at the Goat Shed, which has slowly been gaining recognition over the last the year or so. But this Sopaj kid, 23 years old, looks very talented. It was very surprising to learn that he had his professional debut when he was only 15 years old. He was a few months removed or short of his 16th birthday at the time, but he started his career 6-0. Very solid prospect. Ran into a tough Russian when he was only 17 years old. Took a split decision loss a couple years back as well against a decent regional opponent in Francisco Muzzi, I believe the kid's name was. But since then, 3-fight winning streak. Finished all 3 of his opponents. Current champion on the regional scene as well. But I love what this kid brings to the table. Slick striking down the pipe. Fast with his hands to get to the chin. Good head kicks, obviously. He got a head kick knockout recently. And he's improving his wrestling game, which is what you would expect with him being at the All-Stars Academy, but also some of the guys down there at the Goat Shed have some good grapplers as well. His opponent, Vinicius Oliveira, earned his UFC contract through the Contender Series this past year, where he came through as a chalky favorite, but he went out there and did exactly what a chalky favorite should do, and that's get a first-round knockout, and that's what he was able to do there. Something with his style, though, he has a great 19-3 record, was the UAE Warriors champion, but his recklessness with his striking has led to him getting caught against better opponents, like when he lost his title to Ali Taleb. That was a hellacious and very entertaining fight that was back and forth, but ultimately it was the extending, the falling over his punches a little bit that opened up the opportunity for Ali Taleb to counter him and eventually finish him. Oliveira is a very fun, entertaining, and great addition to the UFC roster, but I think if he continues to throw so recklessly and leave himself exposed to counters, he's not going to be able to make it that far up the rankings or into this, or have too long of a UFC career. He had a much easier opponent when he was originally scheduled for this date, but now I think he has a much harder opponent in Bernardo Sopaj, who I think actually can pull off the victory here. He's a cleaner striker. I've seen him strike effectively from a countering aspect, and even moving backwards, this guy produces a lot of power off of his back foot to land on his opponents and knock them out. I think we could even see Sopaj try to take a little bit of a grappling approach to make Oliveira think a little bit, especially with how wild he strikes. We can see a level change, or a perfectly timed level change from Sopaj to get this fight to the ground. But I think Sopaj, especially as the small dog here, is worth a shot. Now, last thing about it, obviously Sopaj taking this on short notice, but he was scheduled to go 5 rounds and defend his title next weekend. So this guy's in shape. This guy's ready to go, and I think that this change up for him, fighting a week earlier, only 3 rounds, and obviously making it to the UFC, may play into his favor. Obviously, this is a kid that has had his dreams and goals set on getting into the UFC. Maybe not in this fashion, but this is a solid way for him to start off his UFC career against a fighter in Vinicius Oliveira who matches up well with him stylistically. So as an underdog, I think Sopaj is worth a shot here, and I think he actually ends up knocking out Vinicius Oliveira within the first 2 rounds. There you guys go. 2 breakdowns for the new fights for UFC Vegas 87. I still got a few more things that I got to record this evening from the quick picks breakdown that I do for the show. I'll probably drop that Friday afternoon rather than Thursday, given the shake-up in my weekly schedule. I will drop the Locky 2-step for you guys in the next few hours, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And I was going to do the OKTAGON MMA breakdown this week as well, but I'm going to push that to next week. I'm going to do a regional breakdown for a show next week. There's a ton of them next week. We got PFL Europe, we got ACA and LFA next week. So I'll put down a breakdown, or I'll put out a breakdown for one of those cards instead of OKTAGON this week. And if you want OKTAGON breakdowns, I'll only be doing them in written form on the Patreon page. So check that out if you're interested in that. All right. Going to try to save my voice as much as possible to do the rest of these breakdowns and videos for you guys. Appreciate all the love. Appreciate all the support. And I'll see you guys a little bit later for the Locky 2-step / Locky Trinity free parlay for UFC Vegas 87. Until then, peace.